The sea breeze seemed to calm everything, except the weary heart of someone who no longer knew how to start over. "They're 3 little angels," whispered the newly arrived young woman, her eyes misty as she looked at the cradles. But behind the rehearsed smiles and expensive gifts, a dark plan was about to be revealed. On Christmas Eve, the truth burst like thunder, and no one in that house would come out unscathed. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's begin. On Christmas Eve, a middle-aged businessman, owner of a beachfront mansion in Charleston, South Carolina, locks himself in a hotel room just a few blocks from home with his heart racing. He is not on a business trip, as he told everyone. With his phone in hand, he watches in real time the images from hidden cameras he had installed in every room of the house. On the screen, only 3 baby triplets appear: the young caregiver who has lived with them from the beginning, and the woman to whom he has been engaged for just a few weeks. The plan is simple: to see who this fiancée really is when she believes no one is watching. What he does not yet know is that the true revelation of that night will not only be about the fiancé, but about who has always loved his daughters in silence, right under his nose. A few months earlier, this man's routine had been turned upside down. Newly a father of triplet girls, accustomed to commanding meetings, signing contracts, and circulating among the elite, he found himself lost before 3 simultaneous cries echoing through the night. The girl's mother, exhausted and suffocated, left the house, in silence one morning, with a short note on the table and a request not to be sought. From that point on, the businessman became a single father of 3 babies only 3 months old. He hired nurses, read all the parenting books, watched videos, tried to organize schedules and routines, but nothing replaced the embrace, the constant presence, the care of someone who, in fact, chooses to stay. That night, when he let himself slide down the bedroom wall to the floor, with one of the girls in his arms and the other 2 crying in the crib, he realized that despite the money and status, he was completely alone. It was from this desperation that the decision to seek professional help was born. When calling a caregiver agency, he did not just ask for someone experienced. He asked for someone who could live in the house, someone with a willing heart, someone who really cared. Several candidates arrived with impeccable resumes, starched uniforms, and technical speeches, but most backed away upon hearing the word triplets and asked if there would be someone else to share the work, or suggested, naturally, cold alternatives for the girl's future. Among them, a simple young woman from a small town appears, with a worn suitcase and a look overwhelmed by the grandeur of the mansion. Instead of asking about days off or time limits, she only asks what time the girls usually wake up, so she can organize a routine that keeps them calmer. The businessman feels immediately that there is something different here. The arrival of this caregiver changes the entire house. Within a few days, the girls' room stops being a scene of chaos and becomes an organized, welcoming space, with discreet labels for the father to learn not to confuse his daughters, synchronized bottle schedules, lullabies from the countryside, and a rocking chair strategically positioned near the window so that the triplets fall asleep looking at the colorful dawn sky. Within a few weeks, the nights become less exhausting. The father manages to return to work, and the mansion, previously filled with desperate cries, becomes a home with baby laughter and a constant smell of milk and powder. The young caregiver is not just an employee. She is the silent anchor that prevents that father and those 3 girls from sinking completely. But as the house stabilizes, a new anguish arises in the businessman's heart. He begins to fear what will happen if one day the caregiver decides to leave. Hired help can quit, seek better opportunities, follow other paths. The triplets, however, need something permanent, someone who is there not for salary, but for a definitive emotional bond. From this fear, a kind of obsession is born. To find an ideal mother figure, someone up to the social level in which he lives, who fits into gala dinners, charity events, meetings with politicians and businessmen, and who at the same time willingly accepts the responsibility of raising 3 small girls. He begins to attend parties and events he previously avoided, circulating through luxurious halls in search of an elegant, articulate, confident woman who naturally assumes the role of perfect stepmother. At one of these events, at a luxury beachfront resort, he meets a sophisticated, charismatic image consultant, capable of talking to any important person in the room as if she had been born in that universe. When he mentions, almost as a test, that he is a single father of 3 girls, he expects to see the old discomfort appear. But unlike the others, this woman opens an enchanted smile, talks about maternal instinct, about taking care of younger siblings, about the dream of having a large family. For a needy, insecure and tired man, this reaction sounds like a miracle. The romance advances at astonishing speed. Within a few weeks, the new girlfriend begins to visit the mansion frequently, always bringing carefully chosen gifts, posting photos with the children on social media, building the public image of a woman who embraces the motherhood of another with emotional captions. In practice, however, her involvement with the triplets is minimal. She holds one of them for a few seconds, quickly returns her to the caregiver at the first sign of crying, avoids bath times or bottle feedings, and reacts with discreet annoyance to smells of milk and diapers. Meanwhile, the caregiver observes, in silence, every gesture, every attempt by the visitor to transform the girl's room into an impersonal magazine setting, more beautiful for photos than practical for sleepless nights. The pretender's mask begins to crack in details that only those who live the routine notice. She suggests more professional nurses to take the place of the caregiver, talks to relatives and people on the phone as if the businessman's assets were a promising financial project, comments on structural renovations in the house, as if the children were just a decorative element to be repositioned in the future. In one of these phone calls, overheard by chance by the caregiver in the hallway, the new girlfriend talks to someone close about holding on a little longer until the relationship is official, mentions values of properties and business deals of her partner, and treats the triplets as a temporary inconvenience that will be solved with boarding school as soon as possible. The caregiver feels her heart tighten, but fears being misinterpreted if she takes suspicions to her boss. When she finally finds the courage to alert the businessman, she is received with coldness. He interprets her attempts as jealousy, professional insecurity, fear of losing her place. Blinded by emotional need and the promise of a perfect family, he minimizes comments about gloves for changing diapers, strategic absences in difficult moments, and travel plans for symbolic dates, such as the triplets' first year end. Tension settles in the house. The caregiver, who loves those 3 girls as if they were her own, watches helplessly as a woman who seems to want the father, the mansion and the status, but not the responsibility of caring for the little ones, gradually enters. Behind the scenes, the pretender speeds up the pace, suggests moving to a more practical apartment, talks about prestigious boarding schools, insinuates that the children interfere with the couple's intimacy, and that the nanny is replaceable. The turning point happens when the businessman, by chance, overhears a snippet of his fiancée's phone conversation. Hidden behind a half-open door, he hears his companion refer to him as someone easy to manipulate, a needy man who fell right into the theater of love for the children, and describe him as a strategic step toward a life of comfort, travel, and unlimited consumption. There, doubt finally infiltrates his mind. He remembers the caregiver's insistence, the small contradictions, the cold attitudes disguised as freshness and organization. He especially remembers the way that young woman from the countryside, poorly paid and without spotlights, spent nights with the triplets in her arms, without complaining, without posting anything, without asking for anything in return. For the first time, he wonders if he is about to hand over his daughters to someone who will never see them as family. Instead of confronting the fiancée immediately, he decides to be sure. He seeks out a friend who works with electronic security and requests the installation of discrete cameras throughout the house, presented to the staff as air conditioning maintenance. The equipment is positioned at strategic points: living room, kitchen, hallways, girls' room. Everything is connected to the businessman's phone. Then he stages an urgent business trip on Christmas Eve, packs a suitcase, walks out the front door, and instead of going to the airport, checks into a nearby hotel, ready to spend the entire night in front of a screen, watching the behavior of those who claim to love him and love his daughters in the absence of any audience. What he sees makes him lose his footing. As soon as the certainty that he will not return sets in, the fiancée completely relaxes. She spreads herself across the living room with her feet on the coffee table, opens a bottle of the house's best wine without ceremony, complains about the girl's smell, calls an accomplice, and refers to the triplets as 3 annoying crybabies she intends to get rid of soon. When the babies cry louder, she yells at the caregiver, accuses the young woman of not doing her job, demands absolute silence and threatens to turn everyone's life there into torment when she officially runs the house. In a moment of exaltation, she even approaches the nanny in an intimidating way, who places herself in front of the children like a human shield. On the other side of the screen, the father feels his blood freeze when he realizes that he left his daughters exposed to someone who not only does not love them, but is deeply bothered by their existence, seized by a mixture of guilt, fury, and urgency. He leaves the hotel and drives at full speed through the almost empty streets of the city, illuminated by Christmas lights. Before entering the house, he watches a few more minutes of transmission and hears the pretender humiliate the caregiver, confess that everything was nothing but financial interest and promise to get rid of her as soon as she can formalize the relationship. It is the limit. The businessman invades the living room, interrupting the moment when the fiancée advances toward the young woman who has one of the girls in her arms. Without hysterical screams, only with a frightening calm, he announces that he saw and heard everything, shows the recordings on his phone, and forces the woman to face herself without masks. Faced with the impossibility of denying, she drops the sweet tone and assumes, without shame, that she was there for the money, that she never wanted 3 children, and that she considers the man a desperate and easy-to-fool father. Expelled, she leaves throwing cruel words, trying to hit him precisely at the point that hurts most. The fear that no one wants a father who carries 3 babies and a patched-up heart. If you were in the businessman's place, would you have installed the cameras or confronted the fiancé directly? Tell us in the comments. When the door closes, only heavy silence remains, broken by the contained crying of the caregiver, still holding one of the triplets in her arms. For the first time, the businessman clearly sees who has been by his side from the beginning, that young woman who came from far away with a simple suitcase, who gave up nights of sleep, who endured contempt and distrust and still remained out of love for the girls. He apologizes not only for not believing the warnings, but for having been incapable of recognizing the motherhood already present in her gestures, long before any official title. From this painful confrontation, something shifts inside him. The desperate search for a perfect stepmother gives way to the recognition of real, imperfect, and silent love that already existed within the house itself. Days pass in a strange silence. The mansion, always bustling with the noise of 3 babies and the comings and goings of someone preparing bottles and organizing schedules, now seems wrapped in a kind of suspended peace. The caregiver continues her routine, but something has changed in the way the businessman looks at her. He begins to notice details he had ignored. The way she hums softly when one of the girls is restless, how she anticipates every need before the babies even cry, the patience with which she wipes the same face for the 10th time in an hour. He sees for the first time not an employee, but a mother, a real mother, without makeup for photos, without emotional captions, without the need to prove anything to anyone. He also begins to participate more actively in the girl's routine. What before was delegated, with relief, now becomes a bridge for him to get closer not only to his daughters, but to the woman who cares for them. He learns to prepare bottles at the right temperature, discovers that each triplet has her own way of falling asleep, understands that the middle one needs more rocking time, and that the youngest only calms down if someone sings in a specific low tone. During these shared moments, conversations that were once restricted to schedules and medical instructions gain emotional depth. They talk about fears, about loneliness, about how it is possible to love someone without blood ties, about how the heart expands when we let the right people in. One afternoon, while the girls nap and the two sit on the porch, watching the ocean under the Charleston sun, the businessman asks the question that has been tormenting him for weeks. Why did she stay? Why, when she saw the chaos, the despair, the lack of structure, did she not leave like so many others? The caregiver looks at the horizon for a long time before answering. She says that when she arrived and saw those 3 tiny creatures, so fragile and so needing someone to believe they deserved to be loved, she saw herself. She saw the girl she was growing up without many resources, without glamour, without anyone to tell her she was special. She decided that those babies would never feel what she felt. They would grow up knowing that someone chose to stay not out of obligation, not out of salary, but because they mattered. Hearing this, the businessman feels something break inside his chest. All this time, he was looking for someone outside, someone polished, someone who fit the social mold when the answer was there in calloused hands, in simple clothes, in the eyes that never stopped looking at his daughters with genuine tenderness. He realizes that he almost destroyed everything by trying to fill a void with appearances. He understands that real love is not displayed in party photos or emotional speeches. Real love is revealed in the routine, in sleepless nights, in the patience to wipe the same nose countless times, in the firm decision to stay when everything would be easier elsewhere. In the following weeks, something new begins to blossom between them. It is not a sudden, passionate love. It is something deeper, built on respect, admiration, and the complicity of those who face the same battles side by side. He begins to see her not as the solution to a problem, but as a partner, someone who shares values, dreams, and the willingness to build a real family. She, in turn, allows herself to lower her guard and accept that she too deserves to be cared for, that she does not need to be just the one who gives, but can also receive affection, security, and a home. 1 year later, on the eve of another Christmas, the beachfront mansion is decorated again, but the atmosphere is completely different. The triplets, now walking and exploring the world, scatter ornaments around the room, crawl after the blinking lights, scream with joy when the tree balls spin and reflect the colors of the garden lanterns. The caregiver, who no longer wears a uniform and carries a discreet ring on her finger, laughs sitting on the floor while trying to prevent the girls from dismantling all the decoration. The businessman watches from afar, his heart warmed by the scene. The daughters call the woman Mommy naturally, hug her legs as a safe harbor, run to her lap, when frightened by some noise. What he searched for outside, at elegant parties and luxurious events, was there all along, in the simplicity of a lullaby, in the calloused hands that hold 3 small bodies with the same firmness and delicacy, in the sleepless nights when someone stayed by the girl's side without cameras, without applause, and without filters. The marriage proposal, when it came, was not made in a sophisticated restaurant or on an international trip. It happened on an ordinary late afternoon in the bathroom, while the woman was bathing the triplets, getting splashed with water on her face and laughing at the mess. Seized by a serene certainty, he knelt right there with wet clothes and asked her to officially become the mother of the girls and his life partner. The tears she shed that day were so intense that they confused one of the little ones, making her cry too, without understanding that this time they were tears of happiness. Remembering that moment on the house's porch, with the ocean in the background and the children already asleep after a full day, the businessman realizes how much he has grown. He understands that he almost made an irreversible mistake out of fear of facing loneliness, that he almost handed over his daughter's future into the wrong hands by believing more in appearances than in gestures. Now, with the family together, he knows that true love is not displayed for cameras, does not need emotional captions or gala nights to prove itself. True love is revealed in routine, in the way of preparing bottles without complaining, in the lap that welcomes 3 cries at the same time, in the patience of repeating the same story dozens of times, in the firmness of those who face powerful people to protect children who are not even theirs by blood. The caregiver who once entered timidly through the door, afraid of not being enough, became the emotional center of that house, the affection reference for the girls and the heart of the businessman himself. The mansion remains large, business continues to demand attention, but for the first time he feels that home is not the address or the size of the walls, but the people who choose to stay there when the lights go out. The wedding was simple on the beach at sunset, with only a few close friends and, of course, the 3 little girls as flower girls, throwing petals everywhere except on the planned path, making everyone laugh. There were no social columns, no engagement photos in magazines, no hundreds of guests dressed in designer clothes. There was only what really mattered: two people who found each other in the midst of chaos, three children who finally had the complete family they deserved, and the certainty that sometimes the most precious things in life come disguised as something simple, unpretentious, without fanfare. The businessman learned that true strength is not in controlling everything, but in recognizing when we are wrong and having the humility to change course. He learned that money buys comfort, but not love. That status opens doors, but does not fill the heart. That the most important title someone can have is not on a business card, but in the way children pronounce the word mommy or daddy with absolute trust. He learned that family is not always formed by blood, but by the daily choice to stay, to care, to love, even when it is difficult. The caregiver, now wife and mother, also learned her lessons. She discovered that her worth was never in how much someone paid her, but in what she carried inside. She understood that she did not need to prove anything to anyone, that her love for those girls was enough to legitimize her place in that family. She learned to accept that she too deserved to be loved, cared for, respected. That her simple origin was not a defect, but the root that kept her firm when everything around her seemed about to collapse. This story, which began with cameras hidden on a tense Christmas Eve, with masks falling and truths being revealed, ends with a lesson that echoes beyond that Charleston mansion. It reminds us that often what we desperately seek is already within our reach, that real people with genuine feelings are worth infinitely more than perfect appearances, that a mother is not defined by who gave birth, but by who stayed, who cared, who loved without measure or condition, and that sometimes the biggest betrayal we can commit is against ourselves, when we ignore what the heart already knows to follow what the eyes want to see. The triplets grow up healthy, loved, safe. They will never remember the time when their father almost made the worst decision of his life. They will only know the warmth of a home where love is not negotiated, is not conditioned, is simply lived. And perhaps years from now, when they ask about how their parents met, they will hear this story and understand that the best families are not those that look perfect in photos, but those that remain united even when no one is watching. Dear listeners, we hope this story of second chances and true love touched your heart. If you were moved by the journey of these characters who found family in the most unexpected place, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what moment resonated with you most. Was it the painful revelation, the courage of the caregiver, or the redemption of a father who almost lost everything? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, reminding us that love is often closer than we think. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode.